Hey there, it's Karl here, and I'm going to be part of the 30 Faces, 30 Days Watercolor Gouache month that's coming up in March. And if you sign up using my promo code, 30F, 30D, lowercase Karl, you get $5 off. And I'm going to be giving two classes, one in watercolor, where I'll be going for a little bit more of a caricature kind of graphic approach to using watercolors. And then one where I'm going to be teaching in gouache, celebrating the graphic design or its use in graphic design, and channeling really fantastic kind of street art for a very kind of flat graphic, bold style using that particular medium. So there we go. There's that promo code again, 30F, 30D, Karl, and get $5 off. But I'm super grateful to be part of it. There's an amazing host of teachers involved, and I just wanted to play the little promo video that Sktchy's put together for that, so you can see the caliber of knowledge that you're going to be getting out of this class. So here we go. Cool, so that's going to be super exciting. I'm really looking forward to that, and painting along with you, as well as painting along with all the other teachers as well. One last little ad break. For those of you that don't know, I do also have another class on the Sktchy Art School called Painting Portraits with Karl Staub, and that's worth having a look into as well if you're trying to find the time in the day to really kind of get a bit of creativity on a page. Yeah, enough jibber jabber. Let's look at a visual.
Painting a portrait sounds daunting, doesn't it? Well, as someone who creates large-scale paintings, I know it can be daunting. But in this class, I'm going to show you how you can make portrait painting part of your everyday life and enjoy the experience along the way. I'm Karl Staub, a painter from Cape Town, South Africa. I've got 2 kids, I've got a full-time job, so I know how crazy it can be trying to find time in the day to get a little bit of painting done. In this class, we're going to overcome that challenge by painting 8 portraits together. Using just an A4 sketchbook, we'll spend about 60 to 90 minutes on each portrait, enjoying the experience and embracing the results. We're going to use all kinds of fun paints, watercolor, gouache, acrylic. We're even going to use coffee and red wine. Along the way, I'll share tips and techniques gathered from my more than 20 years experience as a painter. So let's paint portraits together in the Sktchy Art School.
Alrighty, so there we go. So look forward to having you sign up for some of those classes and working along with you on those. But for now, let's kind of get back to the 80s. All right, so over here I have, well, just above me, there's our fantastic muse, Mick. And that photograph, as soon as I saw it, I immediately thought of Duran Duran's Rio album. And there's just something super graphic about the pose that Mick has given us to work with here. And I thought, well, what a perfect way to kind of talk about gouache paint today. Gouache paints, pretty inexpensive, are generally, you know, you can get a set for a couple of bucks. It's really not a huge kind of bank breaker, but they are denser than watercolor. Even though they share a lot of similarities to watercolor, the actual pigment concentration is a lot denser, so you get a far more kind of opaque application on the page, which means that in terms of its usability, it's kind of like it's the #1 choice of paints for graphic artists to use, and very likely would have been what might have been used at least at some stage in the design of something like that Duran Duran Rio album cover. Rio was released in 1982, and while the album cover itself was designed by the British designer Malcolm Garrett, the actual artwork that's featured on there of the lady is done by a guy called Patrick Nagel, an American illustrator who really kind of set the mood and tone for a very particular style of illustration in the 1980s that was used across advertising, publications, and of course in album cover design as well. So just having a quick look at the materials, I've got my little UFO palette, which I'm going to be mixing my gouache paints in on when I want to kind of mix a color. The sketch that I've done is on 300 gram watercolor paper, and I've just got it masked down here. I've run a few diagonal lines across the picture with masking tape as well. The reason for that is I want to paint over those lines, be able to kind of pull them off and fill those in with solid colors, so that I can kind of get a bit of that kind of 1980s kind of very kind of graphic, flat, geometric element coming through. In terms of the style, the way that I've drawn Mick, proportionately I've kept pretty close to the actual source photograph. But what I've done is I've really just kept things, my line and my shape identification of where midtones and shadow contrast areas would be, kept them very kind of like hard and geometric, so that I've got some very, very distinctive shapes to work with. So my process today is I'm going to be laying down quite a lot of flat color, here and there treating the gouache a little bit like watercolor, just so I'm not working, so it's not boring to kind of watch me working just purely kind of flat bases of kind of whatever there might be, blues, yellows, all sorts of other kind of crazy hues. So I might just add a little bit of texture as I go, just to add a little bit of visual interest. And the goal is to try and complete this in as close to 1 hour as possible, so to work pretty quickly. After putting down all the final color, I think there's going to be a lot of black that's going to get used. Again, taking a look at the Rio cover that's just kind of over my shoulder there, 3/4 of that actual image is black, indicating the woman's hair. So I'm going to be working with a lot of black as well to get that very kind of graphic element coming through. So to start off with, brushes. I wish I could tell you today what brushes I'm using. I actually don't know. I've literally got the whole kind of kitchen sink here. The one thing I can definitely tell you is a good 0-point brush. That's going to be very helpful to be working with today when we get to kind of the fine detail and defining outlines. But also, we got some really kind of big areas of color where it's going to be really nice to have some larger brushes. I've got everything here from a 24-point chisel tip to the 1/2-inch one as well. I just want to pop another light on just so that the work surface is a little bit, the illumination is a bit better there. Yep. Always handy to have a little bit of extra watercolor paper just to kind of smash your brush on when you're kind of just trying to wipe some color off, or just to, oopsie, what's up with these lights, or to test color, but at the same time a little bit of paper towel as well just to clean the brushes off with. So I'm going to start by, I want to mix up a face tone, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but I want to go for a little bit of a very, very kind of light blue, almost a pearly blue. Okay, so I've got a blue lake color here, and I've got white. So I'm going to add some of that blue lake straight into the pan. And then a fair amount of white over there as well. I just realized I forgot something really important. Give me a sec. Right, sorry, I'm back. This is what I was looking for. Just my little kind of squeezy tube that I put water into, and I can just with a very kind of controlled amount of water, add add the water to the actual palette itself, deciding exactly drop by drop how much I need. So I'm going to first kind of get the white mixed into that water. I want a little bit of a kind of a more of a thin base to work with. I'm going to add just a dot of that lake blue. Start bringing that into the white. Literally, I've just used the corner of my paintbrush to just pick up a few kind of super tiny little bits of that blue, because it really is a strong pigment. If I pick up too much of it at once, I'm going to end up having to throw a lot of white back in here to rebalance my color. So there's a light blue coming through. I mean, it's almost too light. Adding a little bit more blue in there. Okay, I quite like where that's going. So it's kind of like an icy white, a blue kind of tone. So I'm going to take a flat chisel tip brush now. This is a 16 mil wide one, and I'm just going to start by covering up all the skin. So I'm going to leave out any areas that are completely white, like the inside of the eyes, but I'm just going to cover up everything else on Mick's face, just with this kind of flat color now. So in 1980, John Lennon and Yoko Ono released their Double Fantasy album. Tragically, 3 weeks later, outside his New York apartment, John Lennon is shot and killed by Mark David Chapman. Absolute tragedy. But 1980 also did some amazing things for us in music. ABBA gave us Super Trooper. If that sounds fantastic to you, but quite frankly, I preferred the complete polar opposite of the spectrum. Motorhead releases Ace of Spades. So I definitely know which one I would have been listening to. But my daughter seems to enjoy ABBA, so every now and again we do have a little bit of that on. And revisiting Ace of Spades by Motorhead, that's kind of generally when I'm driving in the car on my own. Kids aren't too crazy about that one. They will be. I'll get them to like it. Another kind of big thing that happened in 1980, the Sony Walkman was released in America. So a huge kind of technological breakthrough for 1980 at that point there. How many of you still have a Walkman lying around in a box somewhere? You never know, maybe that thing's worth something on eBay. Okay, so right now it's looking pretty blue, which I'm actually not too kind of panicked about, because I can rather, if I want to, later go back in and do some work on highlights. So it's amazing, when you're mixing that color in the palette, it really looks like that blue hardly did anything to the white, but as soon as it's on large scale on the page, then it's like a really kind of intense kind of color coming through. What I want to do now is start, I think, while I've got my blues out and I'm thinking about more of a kind of a blue tone, I'm going to put a little bit of water in there. I want to work on the hair. I want to build up a little bit of a wash for the base of the highlights of the hair. The idea is I'm going to use a light blue to start off with for a bit of texture. Then I'm going to fill in the hair area with more of an ultramarine, and then ultimately black on top of that as well, and leaving out really kind of key areas of highlights around the hair as well, to where the blue is going to kind of richly come through. So what's nice about working on a kind of a layered approach, I actually want to thin that out. Let's just get something kind of watercolory. Working to a kind of a layered approach here with the hair is that when you're putting down these initial layers of color, you can actually be kind of quite messy. Take a few, just be bold, just bang the color in. Just don't go over the outline of the extreme outlines of the hair where it meets the face, as well as the outside where it meets the background. So just getting those colors in there for now. When working with gouache, it's technically always better to, if you are working in various layers, start with more of a wet wash on the page and work your way up to a denser, more kind of straight out the tube pigment. So in other words, work from very kind of wet, washy colors to working more straight with the drier colors. The paint just then settles into the page better. And if you start off kind of nice and light like this, then generally what happens is the heavier colors, when you put them on, when you layer it up, don't come off. They don't pull the previous colors off. Okay, so at the moment, I know she's kind of we just got two colors down really. I'm grabbing a little bit of ultramarine now and just popping that into one of the pans. Let's grab a little bit of water on that. Let's get that a little bit more loose and wet. So a fair amount of water to the ultramarine. And while my light blue is still doing its thing, let's, while it's still drying on the page at least, let's bring in some of this ultramarine here and there, treating it very much like watercolor, just quite wet, just letting that paint create some nice kind of effects in the hair as well. Again, I'm not, I want to leave some areas of the light blue. I'm not trying to cover up everything. But I do want to just have a few key areas of the ultramarine. The ultramarine kind of taking over. 1981 was a massive year. That was the year MTV was launched. And because at the time there were so few music videos kind of around, the artists that had produced music videos, that did have them available for airing, were the ones that kind of really very, very quickly shot up to kind of fame and stardom, because their videos were just played on a loop again and again. And the very first video that MTV America aired, very appropriately, the Buggles' Video Killed the Radio Star. All right, so I'm going to take a bit of wax crayon now. This is kind of a trick that I remembered from when I was in school back in the day, kind of like kids kind of art class. Looking at Mick's, the polka dots on her top, I'm going to just put a few kind of hard wax dots of dotty kind of pattern over the area where her top is going to be. Because what I want to see happen is when I start building up the clothing, I don't want to have to be throwing kind of white dots down after the fact. I suppose you can if you want to, where, you know, fill in all the color and then splash a bit of white on there. But I'm going to just see if the old kind of wax crayon trick that I learned in junior school still works, where you put the dots down, you put the water-based kind of wash over it, and the water just separates off the wax. So if you've got a white wax crayon lying around, it's a great little trick. If anything, it's kind of quite fun and nostalgic to do this while we're doing everything else today, following the whole nostalgic kind of trend. So let me just bang all those in. If it's difficult to kind of see, it looks like I haven't done anything. I'm kind of sitting to the side a little bit at an angle, and I can just kind of make out where I put all the little dots, just the way that the light falls on the page from a different angle. Okay, so that is happening over there. That's drying. The facial area is going to dry before I do any more work there. So let's kind of do some 80s background stuff while we've got our blues out. Excuse me, Mr. Ant. Hey, come on. Shoot. What's up with that? Okay, Ant gone. Let's put a little bit of color in here. I want to kind of mix up something that's kind of like a bit of a, almost a bit of a powdery blue. So see what happens if I take some of that ultramarine and mix it with that lake color. I want to have something that's quite different to what I've already been putting down on the page. Let's grab a little bit of white. And I'm picking up a little bit of violet out of my gouache set, putting that just in a pan over there. I just want to have some kind of a, just do something a little different color-wise. Get that kind of 1980s kind of powder blue. That's quite cool. Let's see how that looks. Okay, I quite like that. So I'm just going to fill in this whole area just in this one powder blue now. I've got a little triangle over here because I just feel like, you know, if you look at most kind of 80s posters, or if you watch an episode of Stranger Things, one of my favorite TV series, specifically season 3, where they really embrace the whole kind of shopping mall kind of aspect, consumerism of the 80s, you see a lot of that kind of design and that geometric shape happening in the background. Triangles, diagonals, lasers. So 1980s. Just coming back to 1980 itself. At the end of the year, the #1 Billboard hit was Call Me by Blondie, followed closely by Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall. Epic, epic song. And we were talking about 1981 earlier, when MTV was launched. That was also the year that Phil Collins went solo with his, what was the album? I think it was Face Value. And it had that fantastic song, In the Air Tonight, with that epic, epic kind of drum solo in the beginning. You'll know it if you hear it. I mean, man, it's just probably one of the best kind of drum solos of all time. It was also the year that kind of synth pop really took off in the UK. And the UK gave us, was the birth of amazing bands like Ultravox, The Human League, Depeche Mode, OMD. They all started making their appearances in 1981. But let's do some lips now. I'm going to actually start filling in a bit of color now on the lips. I'm going to start with kind of quite a flat flat red. I'm going to pick up a little bit of brilliant red, pop that on the pan. I'm not going to water this one down too much. I want it to be nice and thick. Maybe just a little dot of water just to help carry the medium. 1981, the Billboard 100 closing position for top song, Betty Davis Eyes, Kim Carnes. Still a fantastic song as well. And that was at the end of the year. That was followed up, I think the number 2 position was George Harrison all those years ago. It's a bit arguable if you look up different kind of Billboard websites, or whether it's you're looking at kind of the America versus the British chart positions. There is always a little bit of a kind of a variance, or there seems to be some kind of disagreement in general on who took top positions. But generally speaking, I'm working from my research I did was from the American, whoever was kind of like number 1, number 2 at the end of a particular year. Okay, so the lips, I'm really just kind of putting down this really nice kind of strong flat color. Oh, don't know what's going on. My hand seems a little bit shaky today. It's just starting off with a flat color and just leaving in, or just kind of leaving out some kind of very key highlight areas. There we go. That's looking kind of quite gorgeous and lush. I like that. Where should we go next? Let's kind of start looking at the shoulders. If you look at the image of Mick above me, there is the top that she's wearing is not a solid black with white. There's a little bit of skin tone coming through underneath. So I want to start, I'm grabbing just a little bit of peach or flesh tint color, a little bit of water on there, and I'm just going to put in a wash of that. I just want to feel that little bit of kind of natural kind of skin tone coming through. I know it's a bit of a contradiction to the blue I had down previously, but you're going to see what's going to happen now. I'm adding just a touch of that lake blue mixed in with that peach. There we go. Let's bring a little bit of that in. So that's a kind of lake blue wash plus peach over the areas where we put down the white wax dots. And you can see that old kind of craft technique, a little trick that I learned in school all those years ago, is still working really well. The paint is separating off those white marks. So while I've got my kind of peachy color here, I actually want to add a little bit of that to Mick's cheek area. She's got to get a feeling of blush coming into her cheeks. So I'm just going to add it there and bring a little bit down there as well. And just let that dry and see how that looks. Okay, maybe just a little heavy over here. I just want to control the application of the paint. So far, everything has been quite watercolor technique, a lot of water, mixing those pigments down quite thin. And you're going to see very soon we're going to start really working on much thicker, concentrated areas of color, which is where gouache has its strength. Before we do that though, I want to pop in the triangle, the background here, and then color on Mick's eyes. and then we're going to start really working, and then our foundation layers would be there. So from that point on, we're going to then be putting a lot more kind of heavier tones onto the page. So here and there, I want to do a little bit of, see a bit of purple coming through, throwing back to the Duran Duran cover, which is, there's a lot of kind of violet in there. So I'm going to add just a little, try and mix something up. Grab that white, grab a little bit of violet. So let me just turn my, there we go. You can see that better now. And let's just get that color. Get that all the way across the page. Filling up this area now. 1982, Madonna makes her debut. Her album, the first album, only was actually released in 83, but the first time we ever came across Madonna was definitely 82. And Michael Jackson released Thriller, the album that would pretty much just change the whole music kind of horizon for ages and ages. I think Thriller today still remains the world's top-selling album. Such an amazingly strong album from track one to the very last track. 82, like I said, Duran Duran released Rio, yay, which is what we're really kind of celebrating here today. And interestingly enough, coming back to kind of technology facts, it was actually when Germany started producing the first compact discs. That's it, the first CDs went into production in 1982 in Germany. Number one hit, 1982, was Let's Get Physical, Olivia Newton-John. And thanks very much to Rocky and Sylvester Stallone. It was followed by number two was Eye of the Tiger, Survivor. Looking at Mick's eyes, she has green eyes from the look of things in the photograph. I'm going to add just a tiny little dot of leaf green. And I feel like I want to bring a bit of ochre, yellow ochre, into that as well. So I'm just going to put a bit on the side of the palette over here. Add just a couple of dots of water. I just want to let that pigment bleed into that water ever so slightly. Just that touch of yellow ochre. And then working from the top into the middle of the eye. Start bringing in some of that color. It's maybe a little bit on the browny side. There we go. Let's really kind of get that emerald look coming through. So that's leaf green mixed with just a little bit of yellow ochre. Let's have a look at the mouth. I'm going to, for the tongue, and do something a little different. I'm going to bring in a bit of orange, dark orange, just so that there's a contrast between the tongue and the lips. Sure, I'm holding my breath here while I'm putting this in. Looking quite good, but maybe just a little bit too orange, so bring in some of that brilliant red. Okay, and I want to grab a little bit of crimson or really kind of dark red and now start putting in some definition around the lips. At the moment I'm kind of working with I believe it's called a filbert. It could be wrong, but I call it my watercolor brush thingy. Some of you I think have said that this is called a filbert brush. So what I'm doing now is just taking a bit of a darker red and adding in some areas of contrast to the lips. Eek, color's bleeding into the tongue area there a little bit. I'm going to have to fix that up. And just put in the rest of the color before I go and save that. So I'm just working around the bottom of the lips, adding some shadow. There's more of a kind of a crimson red. Let's take a dry brush and just gently just let the bristles absorb. Letting the bristles just absorb the color on the tongue where it's bled from the lips into the tongue area. Not too worried, because once we get to the black, we're going to balance all those things out. I want to get back to the top now. Let me grab quite a thick brush here. And I was looking for the ultramarine, but I seem to have used that up. Let me grab a little bit more. Running out of spaces to put all these guys. I'm going to have to grab another little palette soon. So I'm just getting quite a kind of a washy ultramarine going here and start overlaying, start putting in a few kind of very angular kind of brush strokes just to give the feeling of clothing, folds, and just general kind of movement. Not covering up everything on the top because I do want to still have that little bit of skin tone coming through. All right. I want my purple here to be stronger, so I think what I'm going to do is go in with a little bit more of a thicker, get some more white into my pan. It's feeling a little bit too kind of watercolor there for me at the moment. Let me just pause and just clean off the brushes. It's always good not to leave the brushes in the water for too long. You don't want the bristles to bend. It's always good just to have them ready for the next time you need them. I do make that mistake quite often where I kind of forget about my brushes. And then I wonder why the bristles are losing that shape. Okie dokes. Where were we? Right. Let's sort out a little bit more of an intense purple. So let me just bring that round here. Just adding a little bit of violet into white as I go until I kind of mix up a color I'm happy with. Good. And let's just put that in on the page. The tone is fairly similar, to what I already had down as my foundation layer, but because I want things to feel a lot more kind of graphic and solid, which is the benefit of using gouache, I didn't want that watercolory effect to happen everywhere. So I'm rather kind of using a thicker application of paint to get a more kind of a solid fill of color. You know, so you're not seeing that kind of watercolory texture coming through. I'm going over my outlines because I actually plan on cutting and trimming the image when I'm done. You'll see why if you stick around till the end. And I'm going to make this background blue over here. I just want that to feel a little bit more kind of powdery. Again, I'm not entirely happy with the way that watercolor vibe is coming through. I want it to feel more solid. So let me just take some white into a pan over there. Take a little bit of that lake blue and mix that up. 1983, I think that was next, right? David Bowie releases Let's Dance, and pretty much gives himself for David Bowie anyway, a normal look. So that was kind of raised a few eyebrows. Everyone expected him to do the whole Ziggy Stardust, the clown thing. All of a sudden, 83, he comes out with a pretty straightforward, regular kind of look. Prince releases 1999, and the Aussie invasion starts. Oh, I like that blue. The Aussie invasion hits the US. That bands like Men at Work have a massive hit with Down Under. I think closing the year off in 1983, we had, that was The Police took #1 position with Every Breath You Take, followed very closely by Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, off the Thriller album. So yes, Thriller was released in 82, but it was released toward the end of 82. And because it was so successful, the tracks off the album, specifically Billie Jean, held chart position for weeks and weeks and weeks. So I'm just going in this whole area with this kind of pale blue now, because I want to get that very kind of cool kind of background to contrast against the purple that's happening on the right. Okay, at the moment everything's kind of looking kind of quite washy, but man, I'm telling you, I promise you, as soon as we start playing with black, everything's going to really bang and come alive. Before we do that though, how about we resolve this little kind of triangle over here? I think I'm actually going to be lazy and put my color, which is a medium yellow, directly onto the paper. Naughty, naughty. I should be mixing it up first. So while we were talking about Michael Jackson, 1984, he was filming I think it was a commercial, if I remember correctly. It was for Pepsi, and he accidentally, some pyrotechnics failed, or there was a little bit of an accident, and he burnt his scalp really badly. And they say, or kind of popular belief is that in the plastic surgery that followed to help repair his scalp, that essentially was the start of poor MJ beginning his love affair with plastic surgery. So I went in quite kind of heavy on that yellow color. I wanted to feel kind of nice and thick. Gonna need some strong colors coming through to contrast against all of the black that's going to be put down very shortly. And I think to balance the yellow there, I'm going to bring some of it into the earring over here as well. So actually just using what I've got left on my brush instead of grabbing some more color out the tube. I've still got quite a lot here on my brush. Let me just put in that solid yellow. Fantastic brush that I'm using now, which is the angled chisel tip brush. This one is a 1/4 inch wide. What's great about it is because of its angle, you can really just use the absolute corners and edges of the brush itself to get in very fine little areas of detail. Like here, I'm just using the corners to kind of just dab in what's going to be indication of essentially the gold chain, which is a little bit different to the way that Mick's earring looks. Instead of doing loads and loads of chains, which is was in the Muse image, I've just simplified things to a single kind of hanging line there. So in 1984 as well, top song at the end of the Billboard charts was When Doves Cry, Prince. Brilliant track. And coming in at number 2 was What's Love Got to Do With It? Tina Turner. I think we're ready to go black. So I'm going to pop this colorful pan aside and just reach across and grab another one, just so that I can mix my blacks onto something fresh. Okay, so now the trick is we're going to be working with black in various kind of degrees of density. And if you're working along with me, I want you to kind of almost think of that you're doing kind of calligraphy. You know, when you see that beautiful style of Japanese calligraphy, where a big kind of brush is being used. In this case, we're going to use the full bit. I hope I'm saying that right. And that's going to really start giving a very kind of very brushy calligraphy kind of style effect to what's going to happen next. So let's add a bit of water to the one bit of black, and so that we can get a more of a kind of a washed, not too much water though. I don't want it to go gray. When working with black gouache, it does tend to dry gray if you've added a lot of water, which means you've got to go back and do another pass, another color, another, layer it up until that dark color eventually dries to the density of black that you want it to. So I've added water there just to get a little bit of a kind of an ink kind of texture, but not too much. So here comes the part now where things really hopefully start coming together. So strong black going down now, and just working it with kind of short, sharp little flicks. And the very tip of my brush, putting in the solid lines, the extreme outlines of where the hair meets the face, just so that I have a guide to work to. I won't accidentally cover up any of the facial features. And then where I've pre-drawn areas of highlights, I'm just very roughly kind of working around those so that I can let some of all of, that light blue that we had in there come through. She should really start coming to life now with this very kind of graphic black color coming in. "1985, that was an amazing year for music. That was when the Live Aid concerts happened. Wembley Stadium, and then across the pond in Philadelphia as well, where it's arguably at the Wembley Stadium event, Queen stole the show with their performance. And yeah, I mean, gosh, anybody that's had the chance to see that movie Bohemian Rhapsody, obviously that's that Live Aid show forms a great portion of that movie. It was also the year that one of my other favorite bands, Dire Straits, gave us the Brothers in Arms album. And Money for Nothing, that was the big hit that came off that. So a little bit of trivia, and I'm always amazed that not a lot of people seem to know this. I could be wrong. But if you listen to that song, Money for Nothing, and you hear the high-pitched singing in the beginning, not high-pitched, but kind of very kind of high vocals, very quietly singing, I want my... I'm not even going to try and do it. Who is it? Who is the vocalist? It was a guest vocalist that came on purely for that. I'll give you the answer shortly. You probably already know this one though. It's a good bit of 80s trivia. 1985. 88 miles per hour. That was when we first met Doc Brown and Marty McFly. I think Marty's over my shoulder there somewhere. That was the Back to the Future, the very first one that came out. One of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm very happy to say I've got my kids into that as well. It's amazing how well that movie still holds up. Okay, and what else can I tell you about 85? Following on the Live Aid concerts, We Are the World. That song, that big hit that had all the a lot of the Live Aid performers in it, that was released. And it did amazing things for the career of artists like Lionel Richie, Stevie Wonder. It really kind of catapulted put a lot of attention on artists that were maybe not as mainstream as the others at the time. Bruce Springsteen as well, he did a great performance in that particular track. So look at this. So right now I'm just kind of letting the brush gently kind of dance around. I'm not looking too closely at where all my little kind of pencil lines are. I'm just enjoying the motion of the brush on the page and deciding kind of where I want the highlights of the hair to show through and where I want things to feel more kind of pure black. Coming in around the top, I'm going to be a little bit more kind of gentle with the pressure that I'm putting on the brush. And I'm going to come down to the fringe line shortly, but for now I just want to get in the extreme kind of details and areas of difference between the dark blues and where it's going to be black. I can't wait to get into the facial features. For now, though, I just want to use this black and really get in all the hair. So if you're kind of painting along at this stage, it really is kind of quite fun. It's just, you're not trying to blend anything. You're going for a very kind of graphic look, a lot of color, and it's nice and quite kind of almost meditative in a way, to just kind of let the brush do that kind of calligraphy thing that I was talking about. Just let that happen on the page. Just watch where your bristles go and make those little decisions. Just changing up your the level of pressure that you're putting on the brush, whether you're using just the edge, just the tip, or putting a bit more pressure down to get a finer or at least harder, bolder line. So there we go, look at that. I'm just using the edge, the very kind of extreme point of the brush. And that gives me almost a sketched kind of effect. So 1985, closing off that year, biggest hit, Careless Whisper by Wham. And thank you, Madge. She gave us Like a Virgin. That took number 2 position. Ideally, you should have some good 80s music kind of blaring, perhaps a little bit of Duran Duran going on. I was really fortunate enough to see Duran Duran live probably about, it wasn't that long ago, it was about maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. I was overseas, and yeah, they performed at nearby. I saw them, and gosh, they put on a great show. They really do. They stand up. The guys are still as consummate and professional as ever. And really, it was amazing to see the audience reaction to them too. They were really just brilliant. You kind of take musicians and artists for granted. You just kind of look at them and think, wow, these guys this is what they do. When you see somebody on stage, you forget that it's actually just 3 or 4 guys at the end of the day, or girls, or whatever it might be. I mean, just in your own home, you might have 3 or 4 people living with you. Imagine the 4 of you on a stage standing in front of a crowd of, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people. That's what those 3 or 4 people in a band like that could do. And that always, when I think of that, I always actually get goosebumps when you think of how much an individual can achieve. All right, so I'm really just getting the hair in now, and almost there. I don't want to cover up too much, I don't think, on this side, because mixed hair does feel like there is a little bit more highlight coming through. So let's just get some good kind of coverage on this side of the hair, but I don't want to make everything black. It's working a little bit of a tricky area just around the pendant of the earring. And I'm just using the absolute tip of my brush to achieve that. So coming into 1986, I don't know why, but for me, I always think of 86 as being kind of like a landmark kind of year. But that was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame held its very first induction ceremony. And posthumously, Elvis was inducted by Julian and was it Sean Lennon? Have I got that right? That's it. Julian and Sean Lennon inducted Elvis, but kind of quite controversially, the Beatles were not included in that year's Hall of Fame inductees. But they did get inducted in 1988. Let's see what else. Say You, Say Me, that great Lionel Richie track that came in at number 2 at the end of that year. But Dionne Warwick had the number 1 spot with That's What Friends Are For. All right, so I'm going to leave the hair there now for a second, and let's get into the eyes. So this is where a little bit more kind of control is needed. You don't want to go too heavy-handed. So I'm just using the tip of the brush to get some eyebrow detail in there. I feel like I actually want to thin the paint out a little bit so I have a bit more control when it comes to putting in details around the eyes. I don't want to go too thick and gloopy. So let's I don't like that. That's too heavy. Okay, that's resolved. I just went a little bit too heavy on the paint there, so I'm just want to have a cleaner line of the black coming in, and I think just let's get a nice kind of sharp line that just gives us the feeling of strong kind of eyeshadow coming through. Okay, getting into the eyes itself now. This is where the black really needs to kind of work well for me. So, all right, so it helps to clean off the brush, and just using the very kind of sharp pointy bit, the tip of the brush. Allowing me to kind of get some really kind of nice kind of delicate lines now to indicate the eyelashes. And let's put a little bit down here for the bottom eyelashes. Something juicy starting to happen now. Putting a little bit of kind of dabs for the pupils, and I think just a little bit, a tiny fine line, just to indicate the edges of the iris. Okay, let's attack the eye on the left-hand side now. Just putting in, almost sketching in little details of where I think key areas should be and leaving out others. So just using the very kind of, sorry if my hand's covering up anything that you're trying to look at, but just using the little points of the brush to little by little just kind of build up sharper lines. See how now that we're working on the black, it's all kind of starting to come together. Coming around the nose area, I'm going to just leave the eyes for a bit, maybe just a little dot there. There we go, close that off. nose area, just a little bit of a tip, a line to indicate that, and nostril area. I want to get a little bit of that nose ring in, so I'm just going to sketch in some of that detail and just get a nice calligraphic line for the edge of the nostril. So that's looking really nice now. Okay. Coming around to the side of the ears, it's put in just a little bit of hairline there and just squiggling in detail of the ear. Let's put a little bit of a black just around the area where the necklace pendant is hanging. The mouth, coming into the inside of the mouth now, I'm going to work on just going around for now the teeth area. There's just moved around the bottom teeth area, and I'm now putting in, working around the bottom of the top teeth, and then filling in the area with black, the negative space at least. Then I think let's take just a little bit of black and add some shadow just underneath the bottom lip, and coming around the side here. That's really kind of something really nice is starting to happen now. While I'm working with a very kind of fine line, I think let me park that full bit brush, and I'm going to grab my 0-point brush now for a little bit more fine line work. And holding my hand, holding my wrist to keep myself steady, I want to bring in just a little bit of jawline. There we go, some nice delicate line to indicate jawline. Maybe fatten it out a little bit just near the ear area to indicate ear, and let's put in just some lines to close off the collar of mixed top. We're going to get back to the top very shortly. So just looking at the face, am I kind of happy with the way things are looking right now? I'd say yeah, it's looking quite strong. We're probably about 80% finished now. Let's just give those brushes a bit of a wash and a wipe. 1987. That was the year where boyfriends the world over were dragged to the cinemas to watch Patrick Swayze and, oh my gosh, what was her name? I've gone blank. I can't remember her name, the actress's name. I watched a movie with her in it the other day. Oh, goodness, forgive me. But Dirty Dancing is the movie. And, you know, we all kind of sang along to things like I've Had the Time of My Life and Hungry Eyes. Those great songs came out of that movie. What was her name? Jennifer, I want to say Jennifer. Oh, goodness. Aish. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Next move would be, let's maybe just pick up and grab a little bit of the black. Come back to the clothing. The actress. She was also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. She played his sister. Jennifer Grey. Hey, nailed it. Cool. Jennifer Grey. Cool. All right, so I'm putting in the black. That's now just indicating feelings of the clothing and really kind of starting to come together quite nicely. I'm liking this. While I've got a bit of a black wash here, I'm going to, 80s love their kind of shadow work. So just put in a bit of shadow underneath, kind of like a drop shadow. Underneath that triangle, add a little bit of dimension. I'm going to pick up on that same bit of shadow again, and you're going to think I'm nuts, but following these kind of diagonal lines, I want those to feel like they've got a bit of a drop shadow too. So I'm just going to drag my brush across the page, going over those areas, going over the actual masking tape itself. And yes, I'm going to be nuts. I'm going to go over this one too, which means going over the face. Holding my breath. Gone a little bit wonky here and there, but that's not the end of the world. Let me do the bottom one now. Okay, things are coming together. Maybe just using a little bit of that black washiness to, let's get some more kind of, that's too dark, add a bit of water. I want to bring a bit more kind of dramatic shadow into the face now, just across the bridge of the nose. Maybe just a little bit of marking to indicate kind of mascara around here. Maybe just a feeling of shadow. Too dark, add water. A little bit of kind of dirtier color to add a bit of shadow underneath the nose area on the top lip. Using my angled brush to keep things kind of quite kind of geometric. All right, looking good. Next, okay, before I pull the masking tape off, we are almost finished. I'm going to try something else. I was watching Stranger Things again the other day, and I saw some 80s patterns in the background that had lots of kind of splatters all over them. So I made a little stencil of the head here, which I'm going to place just over the bit of portrait, and I'm going to take just a cheap toothbrush and put some black paint on that, and I'm going to splatter. I'm going to make things messy now. Let me just move my little watch out the way there. I just want to grab some sheet of paper off camera just to block the splatter from kind of going over anything delicate. And let's get that in. Ah, look at that. Again, another kind of old school kind of effect. I feel like we're really kind of bringing out the craft paint here today. I like that. I like that. 1987, that was also the year, I think the Bangles closed the Billboard charts with Walking Like an Egyptian. And Heart came in at #2 with their track Alone. Just want to get more of a kind of a definitive blob here and there. Ah, looking delicious, graphic, and messy. So have some paper towel nearby. 1988, things started getting really interesting for the kind of the hard rock movement. Well, not that there hadn't been hard rock the whole way through the 80s. Some of my favorite music is, you know, bring out the Alice Cooper, the AC/DC. But 1988 gave us Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction album. And of course on that one, hey, look at that, that worked. Oh, whoopsie, I see a little bit of an error on the lips. I put that stencil down too soon, and we've got a little bit of lipstick bleed coming in here. So let's just correct that. Any little areas that you do see your paint running, Just grab a little bit of water. Let's just clean up that little bit of lip. I was just a bit too kind of quick off the mark there in terms of putting that stencil down over wet paint, and that caused the colors to kind of run a little bit. Anyway, so Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine was the big one on that album. Closing off the Billboard charts that year, we had George Michael, Faith, and In Excess, Need You Tonight. "1988 was the year that the good gods of rock also saw, whether it was kind of a bad joke or for guilty pleasure, gave us Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up. That was 88 as well. And I have to say, there's something kind of quite charming about listening to Rick Astley every now and again, just to remember the cheese of the 80s. So I'm starting to pull off the masking tape now. Normally I would wait for those splatters to dry, but I do want to get on with it a little bit. Oh, I should have waited for the splatters to dry. As I'm pulling off the masking tape, it's pulling up just that little bit too much of the paper itself where it got wet. So I'm just going to gently just try and resolve that just with a little bit of a cut of the blade. Okay, not the end of the world. Okay, for the purpose of a class, I want to speed things up. Normally, I would have waited a little bit longer for things to dry before trying this. So, because I've got a bit of a big kind of paint blob running right across the masking tape over here on this side, I'm just going to use a bit of paper towel just to pick some of that color up, so I don't get too much of a smash of paint. Oh, look at that. Look at those nice, clean, diagonal lines coming through, giving that really good kind of graphic 80s vibe. If you're still with me, if you're still watching, thanks. I know this may have been a little bit of a kind of a long-winded one, but it is almost done. We are now adding final touches. Okie dokes. Let's get some clean water. These diagonals need color. Crucial to that whole 1980s kind of strong popped vibe. We want to see some of that color coming through. So, sorry for the dog barking noise. That's Dexter, my mutt, barking outside. Okay, so it's time for some decisions. What color should we make all of these lines? So this one's going to be a little bit tricky to go over because we've got all that kind of wet black paint still there. So I'm going to start at the bottom. I feel like here, let's bring out that little bit of purple, but a darker one than what we've got going on in the background. I'm not going to go straight out of the tube purple. That is going to be a little bit too on the heavy side. Adding a little bit of water and a touch of white. Putting that on the side there. Let's grab that white, let's mix it in. Get a nice kind of acid grape kind of color coming through. And that takes us into 1989. Okay, I'm holding my hand really carefully here, and I'm just going to apply the color. Got the black bleeding in there. dare I say it, but that black bleeding in actually looks pretty cool. Normally I would go for a dead solid color, but I actually quite like that. "1989, that was that saw Metallica really kind of making a massive debut for themselves. They performed at the Grammy Awards. I think it was the very first time, I stand to be corrected, but I think it was the first time the Grammys had a Best Hard Rock Performance category. Metallica performed their track One, and to kind of massive applause. They were one of the biggest breakout acts of the year. Also nominated was Jane's Addiction, AC/DC, and Jethro Tull. I'm going to go with I think I'm going to bring some orange over here. So let me grab that. Just looking for it here, burnt orange. And the Grammy goes to not Metallica. It went to Jethro Tull, which was a massive upset because, yeah, nobody even knows how exactly that happened. Not even Jethro Tull knew. As a matter of fact, Ian Anderson and the rest of the band weren't even at the Grammys that night because they were so convinced that Metallica was going to walk away with it. So Metallica was shocked on camera, and yeah, that definitely caused one of the biggest upsets, especially because it was I think the first time that particular category was being awarded. So burnt orange going on right now into my middle diagonal. Coming back to that Dire Straits question that I asked earlier, who was the singer with a high voice in Money for Nothing? Sorry, was it Money for Nothing? Yeah. That was Mr. Gordon Sumner, aka Sting. He did all the high falsetto work in Money for Nothing alongside Mark Knopfler's vocals. So this orange looking really, really cool right now. Loving that. And here, because I've got this yellow here, I want to go with the kind of the top one. I'm going to go with a very acid yellow. I'm a little bit nervous because I know I can see I've got some black, some wet black still going on over there. Still drying up here where I did all that splatter work. So what I'm going to do is just give the brush a bit of a clean and not add too much water to the lemon yellow. Let it be kind of quite thick, just in case that black does want to seep into it. If it's too viscous with water, it's going to bleed in like that. But if I go in thick and heavy, I'm hoping that the black will just kind of push away a little bit. So 1989, top positions in the Billboard charts was Chicago's Look Away, but we also followed up number 2, following closely on the heels of Chicago, was Bobby Brown with My Prerogative, a song that really kind of started taking us into the 90s. It was also a great year for music in general. It gave us Fine Young Cannibals out of England. Love those guys. And the B-52s did Love Shack in 1989 as well. Another great track. Okay, I do have a little bit of black being a bit problematic coming in there, but so far so good. That's not interfering too much. Really liking the way this is looking. This is starting to feel like what I wanted to achieve with the 80s cover atmosphere. But before we close off, I just want to bring out one final test. Have we achieved the Duran Duran-esque feeling. So, craft knife, metal ruler, and I'm going to cut out, yes, while the paint's still wet. I should wait for it to dry. But we haven't got time for that, do we? I'm going to cut out the image. See the top one, and I really don't feel like going to hospital this afternoon, so I'm working really carefully with this NT cutter. Where's the lines? Yeah, I'm being a bit naughty. I'm putting my ruler over the paint. Okay, let's get that ruler to the side. I'll give that a good clean just now as well, just to make sure I don't accidentally put the ruler on top of something I shouldn't. Okay, let's make sure that this paper is cutting out nicely. Come on, Mick. Just going over the cut lines the second time, making sure that I'm not accidentally pulling up any fibers. I'm just going to put that aside for a second, get rid of this. Okie dokes. All right, and ta-da! So I painted a Duran Duran little cover, part of the album template there. Let me grab just a dot of Tic Tac, press stick, put that on there for now. This is the test. Do we have Rio version 2 coming through? And there we go. Let's put Mick on top of that. Just for the sake of camera, I'm just sticking it down to make sure that you can get a good view. And I'd say that that's starting to look like a really good album cover. We just need one more thing, and it needs a title. So there we go. M-I-C. Awesome. So thanks very much. That was a lot of fun. There we go, our 1980s kind of look. I hope you enjoyed the kind of the journey. I hope you enjoyed all the little bits of music trivia in between. I had a blast, and I'm glad we got to do this. So from me, Karl, thanks for joining. If you've got any questions or comments, just leave them in the actual feed below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But for now, happy painting, and go dig out all those 80s tracks, and have a great day listening to all of that. Adios.